I leaned forward and blew out the candles on my 9th birthday cake. Make a wish, encouraged my father Gary. Other boys my age wanted a new bike or a trip to Disneyland, but I had just one wish: to know why my mum had left me. It was a mystery that had haunted me for as long as I could remember. "She's gone, mate," Dad replied vaguely whenever I raised the subject. "She loved you very much." Her absence had obviously affected him a lot too, as he got particularly misty-eyed around my birthday. Part of me wondered if I'd been too unlovable for her. Why else would she just walk out and never come back again? Dad and I moved around a lot, as he drifted from one relationship to another, palming me off on friends while he numbed himself with booze and drugs. When I was 5, we moved in with Dad's new partner, Beck, a mum with 4 kids. But even in my new family, I still felt lost without a mother. "Why doesn't your mum ever walk you to school?" asked one of my classmates. My heart pounded as I scrambled for an answer. I was so shaken that the school called Dad to come and collect me. Later, he took me for a drive to Casterton, the small Victorian town where he and Mum had grown up. Pulling up at the local cemetery, I followed him to the rows of headstones. "That's your mum's grave," Dad mumbled, pointing to a slab of stone inscribed with the name Deborah Ann Freem. "She's dead." I gulped, realizing that my dreams of her magically returning one day would never happen. I pressed Dad for more, but he couldn't even explain how she died without choking up. Years passed, and I thought of Mum all the time. One day at school, a group of kids crowded around me. "We saw you on TV," one of them said. "Your dad was talking about your mum." "What about her?" I asked, confused. The teacher quickly interrupted and ushered them away, but the scene played on my mind all day. That night, I mentioned what they'd said to Dad, who shot Beck a look and handed me some old magazines. "Read these," he said, anxiously drowning in beer. Turning the yellow pages, I started to shake as I saw the headline and photos. Reading from the article, I learned that I'd been asleep in my cot the night my mum, Debbie, who was 24, ducked out of our house to get some milk and never returned. The story said a manhunt was already underway to catch the killer of Frankston TAFE student Elizabeth Stevens, who was 17. She had been viciously stabbed and choked to death 1 month earlier. An hour before Mum headed to the shops, the killer attacked another woman, but she managed to escape and he'd fled into the darkness. When he spotted my mother rushing into the shops, leaving her car unlocked, he slipped into the back seat and waited for his next victim. As soon as she returned to a car, he pounced, forcing her at knife point to drive to an isolated paddock at Carrum Downs, where he repeatedly stabbed her and strangled her to death. The discovery of my mother's body a few days later revealed the 2 murders were connected and that a serial killer was on the loose. While extra police patrolled the streets, local women were not warned to venture out alone after dark. Frankston, which was usually bustling, became a ghost town. Amidst the grief, my shattered dad made a televised appeal asking people to help catch the monster dubbed the Frankston Serial Killer, who had robbed his 12-day-old son of his mother. I gasped as I saw a photo of me, cradled in my mum's arms. But she wasn't his last victim. Days later, the body of local student Natalie Russell, 18 years old, was found on a nearby reserve bearing injuries similar to my mother's. The net tightened when a postal worker told police she observed a man watching Natalie through binoculars from a rusty yellow Toyota shortly before the murder. The car belonged to local misfit, Paul Charles Denyer, 21 years old, who was arrested and later admitted to all 3 murders. "I hate women," Denyer explained. "Why those women?" police pressed. "Just had the feeling," Denyer shrugged. "It was like something out of a horror story. Part of me didn't want to keep reading, but I couldn't stop." I was relieved to read that Paul Denyer was jailed for life for the vicious killing spree. The courts give a minimum sentence of 30 years for the crimes. The Victorian Supreme Court heard Paul had been fascinating about killing women for 3 years, developing a taste for blood after slashing the throats of his neighbours' cats and leaving death threats on the walls in their blood. My stomach sank, realising why my birthday, just 12 years before the anniversary of Mum's murder, was always so painful for poor Dad. It was a lot to take in for an 11-year-old. It broke my heart to know that the couple of photos we had of Mum were as close as I'd ever get to her. Other family and friends had their own stories and memories of her, but I had nothing. I tried my best to get on with life, but Dad and I both struggled emotionally. One day, I bought a new motorbike, and the two of us went out riding at a local quarry with my family. I watched Dad ride up the side of the quarry, but when he got to the top, I lost sight of where he'd gone and went down to see what happened. I found him unconscious, trapped underneath the motorbike, with his leg wrapped around it. We all tried to get help, but there was no phone reception, so I rode back to the main road and flagged down a car. At the hospital, doctors took us aside. "Your dad's paralysed from the neck down and will never walk again," they warned. In the 3 years that followed, Dad slowly lost all hope, finally passing away at age 44. Staring at his lifeless body, I realised this was the only time I'd ever seen him free of pain. After Dad's death, I tried to numb my own pain with drugs, and even ended up homeless for a while. During my darkest days, I fantasized about taking revenge on the Frankston Serial Killer. I've heard the stories about Denya's reinvention behind bars as Paula Denya, a transgender woman who blames her crimes on a sexual identity crisis and wants the taxpayers to pay for surgery to become a woman. But Paul, or Paula, remains a dangerous killer who belongs behind bars for such evil crimes. 5 years from now, when Denya applies for parole, I'll be at the hearing to remind the authorities about the life sentence given to a 12-year-old baby and his dear mother. This is a true first-person account from Jake Blair, son of Deborah Ann Freem, a fatal victim of the Frankston Serial Killer. Join me this Sunday for the full story about the killer.